Hi, I'm Father Chuck Peak, rector in the interim at St. Mark's on the Campus Episcopal Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you are joining us for another episode of a teaching series we call The Big Red Doors. Sitting here with me is Connie Backus-Yoder, one of our faithful communicants here at St. Mark's on the Campus, and a person whose life has known its ups and downs, with some fairly serious and critical times in it. And it's always of interest to me in what way critical times help shape our faith, and in what way our faith helps us through critical times. So I've just asked Connie if she would share with us a little bit about what have been some meaningful moments in her life and how she came to faith and what faith has meant to her. So Connie, have at us.
Oh, where do I start? I came to Jesus for the second time. The first time was when I was baptized as an infant at the age of 27, and his brother, older brother, was like 13 months old, and his babysitter came over, and they were having a traveling preacher from Oklahoma come to the church. So she stopped by my husband's and my home and said, "Come to church." And so I did that night. It was a Thursday night, and the traveling evangelist, was giving his talk, and then I heard an altar call, which I'd never heard before in my life, and I sat there. I want to do this. I want to go forward. I want to make my commitment to Christ, because I've been listening to Billy Graham, and his preaching moved my heart, and I always wanted to say, yes, I'll give my life to Jesus. But for 2 years, I just could not do it. And so then this night, that was still running around in my head. And then I decided, yes, I'm going to walk forward, make that aisle walk. Walked forward, but I wouldn't say yes for about 20 minutes until the evangelist answered every single question that I had. It was just absolutely awesome. Then I saw in my mind that if I would make that commitment to say yes to Jesus, to let him be in my life, that, and then I also saw the timeline of history, and and then here was the cross, and then here was, and I saw this in my mind, and I was thinking, oh, now that's weird. And then also in my mind, I was flying 30,000 feet in the air, and if I said yes to Jesus, I would leap out of the plane and fall 30,000 feet in my mind. But as I was jumping out of the plane, saying yes to Jesus, I landed on solid ground in the middle of the air, in my mind.
That's wonderful. Because there are two great hymns I'm thinking of. There's When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, where you were doing it, and then there's also the songs about solid ground.
I know.
On
wonderful. Christ the solid ground I stand. That's right. And my body literally shuddered, as my mind was envisioning this. I'm going, wow, that must have taken.
But since that time, sometimes your life has presented you with some trials that you had to then go back into that moment.
Well, not necessarily since that time. It was before that time, because my childhood was not optimal.
Yeah.
I had a lot of abuse, which included my own mother, my stepfather, and people witnessing. I am going to say this. One time, the only year that I lived with my mom in California, she came home from work and she was so angry, and she used me as her battering ram, and she beat me so bad that I literally felt myself climbing the walls of insanity. And she was so happy with my black and blue body that she paraded my naked body. We lived in a little apartment behind the regular row of houses, to the neighbors. you know, and that was my first experience, I think, with humiliation, you know. But anyway, that's the kind of child that I had. But then my grandparents raised me, and that was such a tremendous blessing, because when I was going into kindergarten, I'd been moved around from family member to family member, and my grandparents said, she needs to have a stable home because she's going to go to kindergarten. So I lived with my grandparents, and they were getting along in years, and to raise another child was a tremendous sacrifice for them. But the last 2 days, you know, every once in a while, memories will pop up into my mind. I don't know if it's the end of life review or not.
Well, let's not rush that.
No, that's not. But I did have this memory that that came to me. My granddaughters are 6 years old, and they're just so adorable. And their brother, which is 2 years old, is adorable too. But I was thinking to myself yesterday when I was at my other son's house, I was 6 years old, 7 years old when I lived with my mom in California, and I came home every day to an empty house. At the age of 7, and at the age of 6, I came home to an empty house. And every day until my grandmother and grandfather retired from the newspaper they owned, I came home to an empty house. I left for school from an empty house, hardly ever getting breakfast. And they were an upper middle class family that was really very loving on one level, but somehow I kind of dropped through the cracks.
Yeah.
So, to fast forward, I searched for love in just about every single way I could. And my grandfather was a pianist, very accomplished pianist, and he taught me piano, and I was a borderline child prodigy. And so that saved my life, because I had something that I had to do. And I was on the radio, you know, had my own program on the radio for a half an hour once a week, and won just about every competition that there was to win. When I went to college, I was the first one that would be learning a concerto to play with the orchestra. But then I had hormones, and I had a boyfriend. And so those hormones and that boyfriend wanted me to get married. So I did. He was abusive, and so the marriage did not last. Then I met their dad, and it was just a life changer. He loved me, and he married me because he loved me, and he knew my background because I told him about all my abuse and everything. And so he said, you know, I just knew I needed you in my life.
Oh, wonderful.
Can you imagine a man saying that? You know, and we were married 36 years before he passed away. And I have 2 beautiful sons now that I cry every day, and I'm so thankful every day because they're every mother's dream, you know.
We're sitting here with one of those sons, obviously, and we're very happy to have him here today. And you come with credentials, because Connie talks about her sons all the time, and about their bringing up. Well, Connie, your life always reminds me of something my dad used to teach me. And that was, you cannot judge one person against the life of another person. You can only judge a person according to where they came from and what they were given and what they've made of it. And then he would add, and since you could never know all of what they were given or what they've made of it, you can't judge them at all.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you just ruled out judgment. But you have, to me, had a miraculous life. You do so many wonderful things for people, and it comes out of a background that wouldn't have encouraged you at all to be a loving person.
Yeah.
So I see your life as a miracle.
Yeah, I do too. If it wasn't for the fact that I gave my life to Jesus, you know, I don't know what my life, because they say an abuser always abuses, and other things, you know, I would have either gotten into drugs, I would have either gotten into bad situations. I'd be in prison, would be dead. I don't think I would have been in church.
No, that's right, the place you wouldn't have been.
Yeah, and so the fact that this couple was inspired to come and invite me to church was a godsend.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was able to say yes to Jesus. And then, it must have been about a month or even 2 months later, my life, you'd think, well, I'm a brand new Christian now. Things are going to be really rosy, and things are going to go really well. Well, they didn't. And I don't know if I was suicidal or not. I don't like that term at all. But I was just so depressed and so angst-driven that I drove around and drove around. I think Chris would have been like 14 or 15 months old by then. And I couldn't find the church, and that I was, quote, made the altar walk, right, altar call. And so finally I found it, and they were just getting done with the meeting. And so I walked in and I was just crying, and I was gray. And the people stayed with me in this depression or whatever it was. Some in the charismatic community would say attack of Satan, but Episcopalians, I don't know.
No, we probably don't talk about that.
No. But something was happening to me that I was not enjoying life, didn't want, to be happy anymore. And they stayed and prayed with me for 3 hours. And finally, whatever it was that I was experiencing lifted, and I burst out into song, and I was given a brand new voice. And it was just amazing. And from then on, I knew that my relationship with Jesus was on solid ground. And I knew that I would never, ever, God willing, forsake him. And he forsake me.
And it sounded very much like in this story, there's this moment, this literally come to Jesus moment, and then there's this encounter in a praying community with the Holy Spirit, and your new gifts and your new life.
Exactly.
And it really changes something does lift, there's absolutely right. And any number of programs talk about the burden just seemed to be lifted.
Exactly, and I was given the gift of being able to pray and be edified. And so that I prayed constantly. And then I had a little Bible that was like, I don't know, it was a funky little Bible. I really liked it in modern language. And I would ask God a question and then kind of leaf through and then stop and then read, and there was the answer. But then maybe about 3 or 4 months later, God said, now you got to grow up, Connie. You got to start reading the Bible and not just pick your passages, that you think I'm speaking to you.
The popular pastime is to pick the passage and then never look anyplace else.
Exactly.
Well, how then did you come to St. Mark's on the Campus?
That's a good question. I was a part of the charismatic community for years, and I was going to an Assembly of God church that was on North 70th, and my husband, and he was like 4, Chris was 8, and my husband wanted to join along with me. They wouldn't let him join because he liked his pastimes, and I didn't care because he was a good husband and he didn't abuse me, and his life was difficult too, and he needed his outer fun. And I didn't want to say, no, you can't do that, otherwise we can't, I just, go have your fun. I had my addictions, I let him have him, but they wouldn't let him join the church. And I said, that's it. And I never went back, and I didn't go back for years. And then I saw an ad in the paper for this Methodist church that needed an organist. Oh, sure. And I had been trained in college after high school. I was an organ major, a voice major, and a piano major. I was a triple major. And so I knew how to play the organ, and I knew all the fancy organ pieces and everything, and I could read music. And I was in that job for 3 years, and finally I decided, I want the degree to go along with my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started coming to the university, and I was an organist in various churches then. I was an organist in another Methodist church, but then I was hired after that first Methodist church to be an organist at a Lutheran church in Beatrice. And I was there 6 months, and I drove back and forth, and they were like radio and everything, so all my music was on the radio. And I decided I want to be a member of a church in Lincoln that is big, is large. So I joined First Plymouth. This was 1989.
Sure.
I joined First Plymouth. And stayed at First Plymouth for, good heavens, till 1998. And trying to think. Oh, but then for 2 years before I quit First Plymouth, I was the organist at another Methodist church. And I fell downstairs, and so I couldn't play. But I had 3 organ jobs at one time. I was the organist at the Jewish Temple.
Yes, I knew that.
On Friday
That's
night.
wonderful.
I loved it, and I loved Rabbi Michael.
Yes.
And I was the organist at the Methodist Church on Sunday. And then I was organist for 2 years at Christ Lutheran on Monday night. And the pastor and everybody really liked me, they clapped and everything, but they got a new pastor, and I didn't play Lutheran enough, and so I got fired. But that's fine. But then, the lady who was at the Methodist church said, there's a program at Creighton to learn to be a spiritual director. Would you like me to help you enroll in that program? And I'm going, woo, sure. So then I knew Father Don, and he wrote me a recommendation. Father Don was a priest.
Right,
here.
Father Don Hanway, who
Right.
was the rector here for a number of years.
Right. And I had Reverend Otis Young,
Oh, yes. Wonderful
give me a recommendation. So for a summer, which they call a semester, they had two semesters. One summer I drove every day 500 miles a week on my car because I didn't have any place to stay overnight and everything. And I just loved it. And then I heard a little voice in me, and I was attending then St. Mark's at that time. I started attending in 1998 because as an organ student at the university, there was another organ student with me that was the organist here, and she said, Connie, come sing in my choir, And so then January, one of the first Sundays in January 1999, I came to church because I had quit the Methodist church and I wasn't going anywhere. And so I decided, well, I'm going to go to St. Mark's. I went, came, sat in the choir in a chair, and I was home.
Mm-hmm.
I was home. I can't explain the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I was home.
So that happens sometimes. You go someplace and you just know you're in the right
Exactly.
place.
And that was how many years ago? 21 years ago now.
Well, we've been blessed by those
Yeah.
21 years, and I think you have too.
I have
think it's been mutual. Yeah.
One of the things that I love about St. Mark's is that every other church I went to, I'm kind of a maverick, and
Really?
I have very little self-control, which the Holy Spirit is teaching me now, that is one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, that maybe I better start encouraging it, But then, it was just difficult I'm just not a people person, and people would reach out their little hook to grab me as a friend, and I'd reach out and miss every single time. I never knew how to make friends. But I came to St. Mark's, and the people didn't love me, as, I don't know, I can't explain. We love you. No, you don't. They loved me not as I am, They loved me as a child of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And that made all the difference, all the difference.
Well, come sing in our choir is the best evangelical tool, I think there is. Not just the choir, whatever it is. Come and be one of us to do something.
Right. And I had substituted here in 1991 when Jane was on vacation. And didn't come back until 1999, you know.
Sometimes, as you know about the fruits of the Spirit, sometimes they take longer than you would imagine. And
Yeah.
actually the fruits come last on the tree.
Yeah.
I'm awfully glad you could join us today and tell some of your story.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much. And thank you all for joining another episode of Big Red Doors.
But there's one more thing I'd like to say if I could.
Yes.
That my life now is built on solid ground, and my life is totally different than if I had not accepted Jesus.
You can't leave on a better note than that.
Yeah, exactly.